Hello and welcome to episode 233 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, how you doing?
I'm good, Andy. It's actually nice to be in the office because this week I have spent a disproportionate amount of time out of the office, still working, but in the Apple store. This isn't a plug for Apple, but because it's the summer holidays, anybody who's been reading some of the latest content we've been pushing out will have seen a piece on the free stuff and cheap things you can do with your children, or your children can do without you during the summer holidays. And one of them on that list is that Apple run courses. So they do courses for coding or GarageBand, which is one of their apps who teach children to make music in their stores for free. And they do a mini course over a couple of days, like an hour and a half each day, and they teach the kids to make music. They don't need to own any of the equipment. Apple provide it. And so she's had a brilliant time doing that, loved it, been incredibly creative. So I have to sit there working in the background in the Apple store while she's doing it, because you're not allowed to leave the store because it's not a creche. I think it's a bit of a marketing thing as well. So you sit there looking,
what is in it for them? But exactly that, it's marketing, isn't it? You're a captive audience.
You're in a very nice store with lots of shiny, expensive objects that I think by osmosis, I think they think you're going to start to want them. But I only mention it because I've been in there a lot this week and it's really good. So if there's anybody out there who has kids who want something to do during the holidays, do have a look at that and the article itself, because there's other ideas. So I've been doing that a lot this week. But yeah, it's been fun anyway. And we've been incredibly busy on the site. I mean, I've never seen so much content pushed out. Andy is driving things forward as the deputy editor at the moment.
It's been a really, really good week. I mean, it must be the sunny weather and maybe it's the aircon as well. Maybe I'm just a bit more productive. But
or the lack of the World Cup cricket in the background.
Yeah, although the Ashes has just started. But everyone in the office has been super busy. I think we've crushed about 12 articles this week. And you know, there's going to be more and more coming out. So It's been good fun.
And we've also did our Monday meetup on Facebook, didn't we? So the digital online version of the meetup. So on Mondays, we go online on Facebook between 12:30 and 1:30. To be honest with you, me and Andy are on there most of the day. So if you write anything on there, you miss it. Don't just not bother. Come along and say hello. Some of you have been engaging with that. It's been brilliant. And for the last 2 weeks in a row, actually, we've given away mugs on the post to somebody who's been particularly helpful. This week, somebody sent through some pictures of me at a previous meetup we did offline, and I'd been wanting those pictures of me with some of you, and that was been fantastic to get those. So we've pushed those out on social media, and they received a mug in return. So please do go online, just chat to us about anything, ask us questions about anything you want to do money related, or just chat about the show. So that will be between 12:30 and 1:30 on Monday. Let's make this happen.
Good stuff. So what have we got coming up on this week's pod?
We've got 3 pieces as usual. One of them is an investment piece that's based off a investment research piece I did for 80/20 investor members. Now, I obviously don't give you the granular detail because that's for subscribers, but I give you some high level info. I spent about 3 days this week analysing every move in the S&P 500, which is the US stock market, since 1950 when it came about. It came into existence in January 1950.
And just a little glimpse behind the curtain here I'm going to give you. I sit opposite Damien in the office, and I've seen Damien looking across the desk at me and his head's hurting, he's rubbing his head because he's dealing with lots and lots and lots of figures and numbers, trying to make sense of it all.
There are 17,500 trading days between January 1950 and today, and I had to look at what the market had done in all those periods, because what I was looking at is how does a market react to all-time highs. Regular listeners will know that probably a few weeks ago I was talking about investment markets, and I made a comment that what tends to happen after all-time highs, you tend to get other all-time highs, new ones, and it was a statement I've never really seen backed up with any evidence. And so I decided to crunch the numbers to see what the market actually does at all-time highs. Does it make a stock market crash more likely? Does it mean a new all-time high is actually more likely? What is the truth? So I spent days doing that. 80/20 investors have the results of it, but I'm going to give some high-level insights for the podcast. The other piece I'm going to do is on pensions, 7 ways to boost your pension. And finally, a very topical piece with the pound crashing through the floor. We got down to $1.21 this week, and it's all because of Boris Johnson and the threat of a no-deal Brexit at the end of October. we're seeing the pound just collapse against nearly everything out there. And it's because of that no deal threat. And so for holiday makers, they're probably thinking, how am I going to afford anything when I go away? So it's a very topical piece. It's still evergreen if you ever want to go away. It's about how to get the best exchange rate on your holiday money.
Excellent stuff. So what are we going to start with?
The investment piece,
the meaty piece, the bit that's taken you most of the week to get done.
As I said, I crunched all those numbers.
Can I just say, I'm butting in here. I know we've already said this before just earlier in the podcast when we were talking about this piece. There aren't many people out there, if anybody, that actually does this kind of insight and research. Damien does this himself. He comes up with the ideas and he takes it from a concept or an idea right through to a conclusion. Even if that conclusion is nothing, Damien himself will admit sometimes he spent days trying to find something and then it turns out there isn't something. And that in itself is actually a result, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what you're trying to do is come up with a hypothesis, something you think could be true, and you therefore prove or disprove it. And the best analysis starts from that point where you're not trying to prove a particular thing and you keep data mining till you get there. Sometimes you just go and get the data and you look at what happens and then you let it wash over you and you see patterns, and then you start to explore those patterns and go, oh, look, I noticed something going on there, see if it repeats, and keep crunching those numbers. And then sometimes you come up with conclusions, sometimes you just don't, and that's fine too. It does mean you might have wasted a bit of time, but ultimately you have proven that there isn't a pattern. So I applied that logic to this principle of what happens at all-time highs in stock markets. And the reason I looked at the S&P 500 is because the S&P 500 is like the bellwether of all stock markets. It's where the American stock market goes, the rest of the world tends to follow, and it's particularly true at the moment. And in recent times, the US stock market has proved particularly resilient. So at this point, it is the market that is touching all-time highs and is hanging around there. Others are still quite away from their all-time highs. The FTSE 100 is below it. If you look across Europe, if you look across into Asia, Japan, they're still way below all-time highs, but they're very close to or at multi-year highs. But the S&P 500 in particular has been pushing new all-time highs. So if that's the market everyone's looking at, if that collapses, then it is a bad time for the rest of the world. So I wanted to look at what happened. So by crunching all those numbers, what I found out is, interestingly, the odds of tomorrow's stock market. So the S&P 500 closing higher tomorrow than it does today isn't actually 50-50. So if you think about it, you might think that if the stock market closes at, let's just go for a nice round, 3,000 on the S&P 500 today, then tomorrow it's got a 50-50 chance of being higher or lower. There's only two outcomes. I suppose you could argue it could be exactly the same, but reality is going to be higher or lower. In fact, it's not 50-50. It's actually skewed towards the upside. I'm not going to give you the exact percentage, but it is definitely more likely to finish higher tomorrow than it is today. It's only marginal, but it is definitely significant. And that sort of makes sense, because if you look at a stock market chart going back to, say, the 1950s, you notice despite all the falls and rallies, there is a general uptrend. There's a general slope going up. And if you think about it, inflation can explain a lot of that, because if the price of goods go up, if the price of things in the economy go up, and margins of companies might go up as well, then their stock price will probably go up as well. So there's always going to be a slight bias to the upside, and that kind of makes sense. So we proved that existed. So markets are inherently more optimistic than probably we are. The odds are slightly higher for any given day to be higher than the last. Now, interestingly, crunching all those numbers, like I said, there's 17,500 trading days out there, and there's been 1,260 all-time highs, which is quite significant, but it's not as many as you might think, because if you're going from starting at almost zero at the bottom end, you're going to keep having your all-time highs until you crash. Now, the bit of insight I will give you is that the all-time highs tend to cluster. They tend to group closely together. Now, for 80/20 investor members, I actually worked out what the average time between different all-time highs is. So subsequent all-time highs, how long does it take the market to hit a new all-time high after it hits one today? And it's a lot smaller than you will think, but I actually work out what that is. And so when you get an all-time high, based on the research that I carried out, you could pretty much guess how soon the next all-time high is likely to occur. It's not guaranteed.
Statistically.
I also worked out when 80% of them occur. And that was very surprising. But what I will tell podcast listeners is they tend to cluster. So overall, that means that attaining an all-time high is a positive because they tend to cluster, as I've said. Now, what we've seen, interestingly, I started to look at those all-time highs and started to look at, well, how have they occurred over time as well? We're talking about over the last few decades. And what we're seeing is that all-time highs are happening at greater and greater frequency. And they are happening particularly in the last decade. And if anybody listening to this podcast, their first question should be, so why could that be? Why could we be getting more all-time highs at a greater frequency than we did previously? And the answer more than likely lies in central banks. So central banks have been printing lots of money, they've been slashing interest rates, and you remember the garden analogy I talk about when we water the garden. All that easy money flows in and settles into riskier assets. It tends to find its way towards stock markets, ultimately in equities, and it pushes markets higher. And because of that flood of money, it's distorting the markets and it's increasing the chances of new all-time highs. And statistically, I've proven that does actually occur. So it explains the idea of buy the dip, because buy the dip is a mantra that came about where if the market sells off, you've got to buy it. And that's great and that works until obviously it doesn't, and then it turns into sell the rip. But over the last 10 years, that has been an incredibly successful investment strategy. Buy everything. No matter when the market sells off, buy back in because the central bank has got your back. But there is a flip side to it, because I also started to look at all-time highs. They occur at increasing frequency, and the chances of getting one all-time high actually increases the chance of getting another one. So it's actually a very bullish sign. But I also looked at the chances of having a sell-off, a 10% correction after an all-time high, and when they occur and how they occur. So I looked at how long they occur after all-time highs, whether there was some sort of correlation. I looked at the odds of a 10% correction after an all-time high rather than another all-time high, and I looked at how soon they occur. Now that insight is very interesting, and that's going to be kept for 80/20 investor members. So if you want a free trial, you can go and have a look at it. But the one thing I would say is that the severity of the sell-offs has actually increased in recent times. So that again can be explained by the central banks' manipulation of markets. So the markets are distorted. If you distort something, then there's always a danger that it can then whip back into shape, or try to, when that support's taken away. Now, if you think back into September time, October time last year in 2018, then there was a very good example of where the market thought the central banks around the world were removing the easy money, so in particular the Federal Reserve, and the market basically pulled back. And the way it pulled back, it started to pull back. We had a sudden sell-off, and then that sell-off accelerated towards Christmas and the low of Christmas Eve. So that's a good example of how the market reacts negatively. So it's a word of warning. So while it may feel like risks are being removed to a certain extent because the Fed and other central banks have your back, the point of when they don't, well, it becomes uncomfortable and your risks are actually rising. And if you extrapolate this into the future, what it suggests is going to happen when there's a day of reckoning, when the central banks really can't keep pumping money anymore. It just is ineffective. It's like a patient who's unwell and you keep pumping them full of drugs. There's a point when those drugs stop working. We've got probably a day of reckoning coming at some point, and it's going to be pretty ugly if you extrapolate what the research shows. And one final piece of insight that I want to give podcast listeners: if you want a good example of how the market behaves, what the market might do around all-time highs, a very good example to refer back to is May 2015. So if you look at how the market behaved after the all-time high in May 2015, and then we had a correction in the August, which was centered around China, and then we had another all-time high back in July the following year. Look at how that market behaved then. That is a good example of how markets behave at all-time highs historically. It's not an exact, history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And if you're going to use one example to try and rhyme from, go and look at how the S&P 500 behaved over that period. That is a good indicator of what you might see at other all-time highs. So the message of this is all-time highs on stock markets are actually a very positive thing. It doesn't mean a correction won't occur, but it is actually a very bullish sign. So when you see analysts talk about all-time highs, or the newspapers talk about all-time highs as a negative thing, as in a crash is imminent, it's coming, then history suggests that isn't actually true. then history suggests that that isn't necessarily true.
Good. So that's for 80/20 members. If you're not already an 80/20 member, head over to the website, click on 80/20 and take yourself a free trial, and you can read that article in its entirety for free.
You can. It's like I say, it took me days, and there's sometimes you do these bits of research and you're incredibly proud of them because they will be things you refer back to again and again and again in the future, and that is one of them.
So next up, we're talking pensions. 7 quick ways to boost your pension. It's an article that's gone live on the site. Damien, you're going to provide some more insight.
Yeah, so we looked at 7 quick ways to boost your pension, and there's an article that goes into much greater depth on the website if you want to refer to it after listening to this piece for a bit more information. But there are ways you can boost your pension, and one of them, the very first one, is pension credit. It's something that's overlooked. Now, pension credit is essentially a benefit that you can apply for. It is means tested, and you can only get it if you're over the state pension age. Now, there are 2 parts to pension credit. There's a guaranteed credit part, which basically tops up your income, and there's a savings credit, which is aimed at people who've saved up a bit. It's a bit of extra for them. So, pension credit, if you are eligible, how much can it top up your income? Well, the guaranteed credit bit can top up your income to £167 a week or £255 for couples, and the savings credit could give you an extra £13.72 a week or £15.35 per couple. And now the average claimant gets about £58 a week according to government figures. But of course, if you are eligible for pension credit, then you will also likely qualify for other benefits such as lower council tax, cold weather payments, free dental care. So you need to make sure you look at those. If you ever want to check if you're entitled to any benefits, go to Entitled To on the .gov.uk website. It's a tool. Basically, you answer a number of questions and it will work out which benefits from a range of benefits you may be able to get. Now, as I said, there are some qualifying criteria, one of which is if your income is less than £167.25 a week as a single person or £225.25 as a couple, then you could be entitled to the guaranteed credit part of it. But the point is, go and read the article with all the criteria and explains it in more detail and more accurately than I've just explained it there. The key message as well is that you may know somebody who might be entitled to pension credits. You may have a parent or a relative who may be entitled to pension credit. And the issue is, a lot of people don't realise it's something that exists that they could claim. So make sure you check if you are eligible or somebody else is eligible for pension credit.
Yeah, no one's going to be knocking on your door checking that you're claiming these things. You have to actively go out and seek the advice.
Yeah,
which is such a shame because there's people going through hardship and don't even know these kind of things.
And the second one is delaying your state pension. Now, lots of people don't realise you can delay your state pension. So if you get to state pension age, now as it stands, you don't automatically get your state pension. You have to ask for it. And if you don't, then you technically start to defer your state pension. And you can do that. And the reason you might want to do that is because if you defer your state pension, you effectively get your ultimate state pension when you get to claim it boosted slightly. And now there are different rules depending on when you retired. So there was the old basic state pension. There's slightly different rules for those people who have deferred compared to the rules for people who are now on the new state pension system that we've got. So for people who are going to retire now on the new state pension, if they defer their state pension, they decide not to take it and they say, do you know what, I'm going to take it at some point in the future, they get a 1% boost for every 9 weeks they delay. So what that works out to be, if you delay taking your state pension by a year, you get an extra 5.8% boost to your state pension each year as a result. So to give a real life example, the full state pension is £168.60. If you deferred your state pension by a year, 52 weeks, it would mean that when you then went to claim it, you would get an extra £9.74 a week, which is equivalent to £506.48 a year. Now, if you were due to claim your state pension prior to April 2016, that would have been the old system. Then there's slightly different rules, which there is an article on the website which goes into detail. I won't talk about it on the podcast because the chances are if you've deferred your state pension, then you already know what you're going to get. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. So we won't waste time talking about that. Now, there are pros and cons, of course, from deferring your state pension. I'll rattle through a couple of them. The pros, of course, is it boosts your ultimate payment, and you can manage your tax bill in a way because state pension is taxable. You may be working, you may decide you don't want to take your income, your state pension in that particular year, because it will increase your tax. You may decide to defer it a year and it will reduce your ultimate tax bill. Now, the cons, of course, if you are in poor health, there is obviously a trade-off here, because in order to make it worthwhile, because if you give up a year's state pension, then you only get a small increase each year from then on. And so there's a balancing act by which point the extra amount you get a year equates to the annual amount you gave up in the first place. And if you do the maths, you need to live for about 18 years from the point at which you start claiming in order to win, basically, which is why a lot of people won't do it. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind, if you do any of this, then it may impact other benefits as well, because you're starting to change your income. So something to bear in mind. Next up, paying missing national insurance contributions. If you're nearing retirement, then you should go to the .gov.uk website and get a state pension forecast. That will tell you what pension you are likely to get from the state. And of course, don't forget that it's based upon qualifying years of paying national insurance contributions, and currently it's 35 years to get the full state pension. And you need 10 years, remember, to get anything at all. Now, of course, there could be reasons why you've got a bit of a gap in your record. So you are able to pay some of that gap if it's been within the last 6 years usually. So you can pay voluntary national insurance contributions to fill any gap to make sure you get a full state pension. Now, usually it is worth paying those contributions, because if you do the maths, then the amount that you pay to get your full state pension going forward, it will only take you normally about 4 years to be quids in again, because the amount you've outlaid national insurance contributions is relatively low, but you would get that back after 4 years effectively by having a higher state pension year on year. So it usually is worth it. So it's something to bear in mind. So another way to boost your pension income is if you are thinking about getting an annuity, I always struggle to say that, then think about an impaired or enhanced life annuity if you have an illness or you smoke. Now, people often think and realise that when it comes to life insurance, the healthier you are, the better, because you pay less premiums on life insurance because the insurer thinks you're less likely to die. Conversely, in the annuity world, the more likely they think you are to die, the more money you get from your pension pot. So if you had $100,000 pension pot and you went and bought an annuity, if you buy an enhanced or impaired life annuity because you're a smoker or you are unwell, you have some medical condition, you will get more a year income than somebody who is fit as a fiddle. So it's the one time in life that you win by being unwell, and it can mean you get 20% to 50% higher income. Don't just dismiss annuities out of hand is the message. Now, number 5, pension drawdown. We recently did a whole podcast on this. There's more information, as I say, on the website, but pension drawdown is whereby you can decide to, say, for example, take some tax-free cash from your pension and you put the rest of it in and invest it, and you can then start to draw from that and produce an income stream. By investing the money, it can grow. And of course, there is the flip side. It could, if markets crash, it could fall. But you can use pension drawdown if you're shrewd enough to try and grow the income and make it more sustainable over a longer term. It's something to look at, and if you're unsure, then always seek advice. Number 6, look for lost pensions. Now, most of us have moved around jobs. We have pension pots all over the place we may have forgotten. Now, if you find those pensions, you could consolidate those and you could end up having a bit of an income you didn't realise that you were entitled to. So to find them, use the pension tracing service. Again, go to the .gov.uk website, and it's free to use. You can find your old pensions and then you can choose to try and consolidate them. There are companies like Pension Bee who we've done a review of. Go and look at the review on the website, which is a company that specialises in finding and consolidating your pensions, in fact, into one sort of cheap pension product, which you can then use to draw an income from or grow if you want. So go and have a look at that. It's one of the tech startups and is doing very well. And finally, claim tax relief. So there are people, particularly high rate taxpayers, who may pay into a pension and not claim the full amount of tax relief they're entitled to. And they have to do that via their tax return. You'll always get the basic rate amount, the 20% kicker. It will be claimed by your pension provider automatically. That should be the norm. But if you are a 40% taxpayer or more, you need to claim the rest via your tax return. Ultimately, that will mean that you've got some money that you are entitled to that you can claim, which you can then do as you will with that and invest that for your future if you want. You've got 4 years in which to make a claim for tax relief on previous pension contributions. So there we go. For more information, do go to the website. Okay, so while I was doing that piece, I booted Andy off the show slightly. He sidled out. You didn't notice because we've got something a bit different for the last piece. We've got Lauren is on the show. Can I just say welcome to the show, Lauren?
Yeah, thank you. I feel like I finally made it at Money to Masses. Now I featured on the podcast.
You've made it, Lauren. You already had. You were on the videos. Go and look at Millennial Money if you listen to this podcast. Now, that's on our YouTube channel. It's on Instagram. We do put it out on Facebook. And Lauren and I do a show where we talk about things that are perhaps more aimed at millennials. It's not exclusive to millennials in any way, but it's things that are perhaps not investing focused and more wider topics. Now, I have to quickly say happy birthday to Lauren because it is Lauren's birthday today. I won't ask how old she is because apparently that's rude to ask a lady how old she is. But I apologise for the fact you've got to work on your birthday, Lauren, at least.
Yeah, look at me, Miss Dedicated over here.
So, Lauren used to be... Well, you can tell people, what did you used to do as a job in one of your previous lives?
Yeah, so before I came to work at Money to the Masses, I was cabin crew for British Airways. So, yeah, I used to fly around the world as my job.
So Lauren knows more about travel money than anybody else I know. So she has inevitably become our travel expert on Money to the Masses. So if you want to know anything about the likes of Revolut and what they do at Monzo in terms of travel money and all those benefits and perks, Lauren now does all of that. So this piece is a very quick whistle-stop tour on what to do about the pound. Now, the pound has been crashing through the floor. If you are holidaying outside of Europe, you're probably not too impacted or not as impacted. I mean, Turkey, all-inclusive holidays to Turkey, I think have been pretty popular because obviously Turkey is outside the EU, but still the pound has plummeted against the Turkish lira. Of course, all-inclusive holidays, people have benefited if they booked it ages ago. They've been protected from this fall in the pound. But for the rest of us, we still got to have holiday money. So what do we do about a problem like the pound falling through the floor? So over to Lauren. The question I've got then, Lauren, is people are going to go on holiday in the next week or so and they've got to take some money abroad, or they're going to go and spend money abroad, whether it's in euros, dollars, wherever they go in. What would you do given the fact that you used to do this for a living?
So personally, I would get a Revolut card. So you might go, oh my gosh, what the hell is one of those? But when I was flying, someone said to me, have you got a Revolut card? So straight away, I went on the App Store and had a look. So what you do is you download the Revolut app and you can sign up for a Revolut card. So it's basically a prepaid card, but it's not one of those rubbish ones that you get when you go to a travel agent where you have to load all of your different currencies, so your dollars and euros, etc. With this, which is really cool about the Revolut card, is you can just load Great British pounds on the card, and then no matter where you go, you can spend that money. So it was really great for me when I was flying around the world, because I just used to put some money on there no matter where I was, because for one day I'll be in China and the next day I'll be in Australia. I always had the correct currency because I just had the pounds on there. So whenever you pay, you go into a shop, no matter what you buy, you pay with that money and it automatically converts it into the local currency for you. So you don't have to worry about all the exchange rate, and it does it for the exact exchange rate at that time. So you get the best rate that you can at that moment in time.
So what that means is, in effect, rather than when you go to the high street and you get the exchange rate and they have fees and you end up getting next to nothing, or worst case scenario, you change money at the airport or you use your normal bank card, you get hammered. You get the exchange rate you see when you Google it, when you're on the news and stuff like that. You get that absolute rate then, which is therefore so much better than anything else out there. So Revolut, Lauren converted me to Revolut actually when I went away to New York for my 40th birthday. For long time listeners will remember that I went away for my 40th, and it's brilliant because you can load the money up instantaneously. When you pay, it converts instantly. It's a good card, but there are other equivalents, aren't there?
Yeah, so the other cards you can use are Monzo or Starling Bank. So you may have heard of them. They're the new app-only banks on the market. Monzo and Starling Bank, they're great. They work exactly the same as Revolut when you're abroad, so you have no transaction spending fee. So you can spend abroad at no extra cost and you don't get the hiked bank fees that your normal debit cards would load on when you're purchasing, because they obviously charge you to transact the money into the different currencies. So Monzo and Starling are really great. They work in exactly the same way. You can draw cash out for free. Most of them now actually have a limit for up to £200 per month, but 9 times out of 10, you don't actually need cash anymore. As long as you're in a place that accepts a MasterCard, you'll be able to spend the money at no extra cost. The only thing that I do prefer with Revolut to Monzo or Starling is with a Revolut card, you can just top up there and then. So as long as you've got Wi-Fi or a 3G or 4G signal when you're out, you just literally open up the app and click top up. And just like that, the money is on your account. Whereas when you use Monzo or Starling, you have to actually transfer the money through banking as you would. So it takes a little bit longer to do. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I just find that a bit annoying.
No, but I did say on the Revolut one, I remember paying for something in a restaurant and the waiter was giving me the bill. By the time he'd given me the bill, I'd clicked and transferred the money in sterling from my bank account, topped it up, and it'd all gone through. That's how quick it is. The downside, I have to say though, you pointed this out to me when I was using one, is that the Revolut card isn't a bank, so therefore it's not covered by the FSCS. So if it goes bust, then there are some issues, because you guys as cabin crew never used to put too much money on it, did you?
Yeah, I wouldn't run the risk of having money, especially travelling around the world. Probably more likely to have our card cloned going to all these random places. So I always used to put £50 to £100 on there every trip, just so that I didn't run the risk of having any money stolen from me. So that's the way around it, obviously. Whereas with Monzo and Starling, you might have access to your full bank account in there. However, the great thing with these app-only banks now is you can go in and freeze your card instantly. So if you do lose your card, you open up the app and you freeze it. So that does prevent the potential card fraud.
But obviously Monzo and Starling are fully fledged banks, so that's what the one big positive they have over Revolut. So let me ask you this: the next time you go on holiday, okay, which one are you going to use? Because Lauren looks at all of them. Curve. If you want to find her reviews of all these products, they're on our website. Full reviews on Revolut, Monzo, you name it, Starling, Curve. But you can only pick one. I'm not saying you're going to endorse them, but you can pick one. Which are you going to pick?
I would probably pick Revolut.
There we go. So if you want to, I'll finish on 2 other bits quickly. If you do want cash, so inevitably people do want money, so they're going to go on holiday for taxis and things like that, then the best way to find the best rate out there is not to go obviously to the airport, is to shop around. Now there is a website that's run by Money Saving Expert called travelmoneymax.com, and the way it works is you go on there, you decide whether you want to have the money delivered to you, so the cash, or you can collect it, so you can just go to the shop or whatever. You put in there where you're going, it will tell you the best rate. So it means that it even works by postcodes. If you want to collect, you put your postcode in and it will tell you the one that's nearest to you that's giving you the best rate. So make sure you use that. It's travelmoneymax.com. One final thing, Lauren, before we wrap up and I bring Andy back into the studio. I might not actually. One final thing, if people want to use credit cards, throw some names of the credit cards that you've written about that are any good.
So the best ones for no fees abroad are Barclaycard Platinum Cashback Credit Card, Halifax Clarity Credit Card, the NatWest Credit Card, or the Post Office Platinum Card. So they're the best ones with no fees abroad, but some of them do have a cash withdrawal fee. So go check out my article that I've written online for the best way to spend money on holiday. One thing to remember though, if you do use a credit card when you're spending abroad, if you have a look at the Curve review, that means you'll be able to spend abroad with your credit card but with no fees. So if you check that out, you might be able to continue using your current credit card, but if you spend with Curve, it means that you won't have to have the credit card fees.
So Curve is one app card that basically hides all the others behind it. So it's like a bit like some people who use things like Apple Wallet. You can use your card through it by using this overriding card, but it means that you don't pay those fees. But go and have a look. It's a clever idea, but there are limits. That is it, Lauren. I think we're done for this week. I'm not going to invite Andy back in the studio. You can finish the show off. Don't forget to join us on Facebook between 12:30 and 1:30 p.m. on Monday. Me and Andy will chat. And I think, are we done, Lauren?
Yeah, I think that's it. Just make sure you follow us on our social media channels. So I take over the social media channels. So our Instagram is @moneytothemasses. Our Facebook is Money to the Masses. And then obviously Damien's on Twitter @moneytothemasses with the number 2.
That's why our social media is so good, because Lauren does it. So that is it until next week.
Damien, am I coming back on?
No, Andy, we're finished.
Been replaced, mate.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.